Start with one solid thought, a declaration you send to yourself, not to hear, but to become. It could be, I will choose wise responses, or I will sustain high energy all day, or simply, I create results, not wait for inspiration. The sentence matters less than the belief you place in it. Choose a sentence you can believe in, and repeat it daily until your body and mind accept it as naturally as breathing. Victory does not begin with grand actions. It begins with the right direction of thought. And that direction is set in the split second you open your eyes. You don't need reminders, alarms, or anyone to push you. Just remember, if your first thought comes from outside, you've been programmed. If you choose it, you are reprogramming yourself. And that is a power no one can take from you, as long as you are serious enough to protect that moment. Every morning without missing a day, without backing down, without compromising with old habits, because when you master that first second, you master the day. And when you master the day, you master the month ahead. And from there, you rewrite your entire life path with a thought you once believed was small, but it was never small. It is the lever, the starting line, the first whisper that determines whether you are headed toward greatness or quietly drifting back to delay. There is no explosion, no warning, no clear sign beforehand. Poor thinking doesn't strike you like a fall, doesn't make you scream like a heart attack. It simply and quietly seeps through every small, repeated thought in your mind each day, until one day you look back and no longer recognize how far your life has drifted from where you once dreamed of going. That's how it works. No noise, no shock. It just needs your permission. Have you ever said things like, I'm not sure I'm good enough, or they'll probably choose someone else, or worse, maybe I wasn't born for this? These sentences don't sound dangerous. They seem humble, even reasonable. But be alert. It's precisely those thoughts that sound reasonable that are silently corroding your strength. Because when they go unchallenged, they stay. And when they stay long enough, they begin to reshape how you choose, how you react, and eventually how you live. Poor thinking isn't just about incorrect beliefs. It's about unexamined ones. They are formed from things other people said, from failures you never understood, from wounds left unhealed, and from the habit of thinking less just to avoid headaches. And because they don't cause immediate pain, you lower your guard. You let them stay, take up space, shape your perceptions. Every time you're about to do something bold, old thinking whispers, careful. Don't push too far. Every time you intend to change, it reminds you, what if it doesn't work? The troubling part is, they're never loud. They don't need to shout to control you. They just speak softly enough that you won't resist, familiar enough that you accept them as truth. That's when you become imprisoned in a cell you built yourself, brick by brick, with thoughts no one ever questioned. Outsiders may still think you're fine. You go to work, you smile, you might even inspire others. But inside, you know, there are limits you can't break, not because you're not capable, but because you've agreed to live with a version of thinking that's too small for too long. No one teaches you to question your own thinking. The education system, society, even family at times, subtly encourage you to be obedient, meaning don't challenge norms, don't ask too many questions, don't wander too far from the path. But no one tells you that if you don't challenge old thoughts, you'll never build a new identity. You'll just repeat yourself, even if it's a prettier version. But pretty doesn't mean true. Safe doesn't mean effective. And silence doesn't mean okay. The most dangerous environment is one where poor thinking becomes the norm, where self-doubt is seen as caution, where accepting things as they are is labeled as maturity, where no one believes in quantum leaps, so they call you delusional when you dream big. If you're not alert, you'll absorb it all, not through rebellion, but through quiet agreement. And then you wonder, why do I feel exhausted when I haven't done anything wrong? Because you've lived under the dust of poor thinking for too long, without realizing it's suffocating your inner power. Poor thinking Doesn't destroy you in a day. It just chips away at you 1% each day. Makes you take half a step back when you should be moving forward. Makes you hesitate on a decision. Makes you say, it's okay, instead of, I need change. Each time you lose a bit of agency. And when the moment finally comes when you need to break through, you realize your action muscles have weakened too much to spring up. Not because you're lazy, but because you've been paralyzed in your mind. To break out of that loop, you don't need to learn something new right away. The first task is cleaning up. Dismantle each sentence, each belief, each definition you've been holding on to but never reevaluated. Who told you you're not leadership material? Who taught you that you need a powerful connection to succeed? Who made you believe that change is selfish? None of those are inherently wrong until you let them operate as absolute truths. So go back to the roots. Examine every thought like a quality control inspector. If it doesn't make you stronger, clearer, or braver, remove it. You don't need anyone's permission to do that. You don't need an expensive self-development program. You just need the courage to face your thoughts. No sugarcoating, no avoidance, and ask one simple question. Is this thought serving the best version of me? If the answer is no, then don't keep it. No matter how familiar it feels, poor thinking, even in silence, is still a merciless saboteur of your future. And remember, you cannot change your life with one big action if the operating software is still made of old loops that have been eroding you for years. Begin at the place everyone overlooks, the silence of familiar thoughts, because it's precisely there, where no sound is made, that your future is quietly slipping away hour by hour. And if you're brave enough to truly listen to yourself again, you'll know. It's time to rewrite your entire life from the thoughts that no longer deserve to stay. No one hands you a license to start living the way you truly want. No committee will ever gather to say, now you're qualified to dream big. Those who create turning points in their lives, who build businesses, carve out their own paths, or completely transform themselves, don't wait for permission. They begin with an inner decision, firm and non-negotiable, that says, I will think differently, and therefore I will live differently. Thought has the power to reshape reality, but only when you dare to choose a way of thinking that does not require validation. Because most of the world won't encourage you to be different. They are comfortable when you remain the same. They feel at ease when you don't ask big questions. And they feel safer when you doubt yourself, just as they once did. But you cannot step into a bigger life while trying to make everyone around you feel comfortable with your change. Maturity in thought always comes with rejection, not from others, but from yourself, toward your old standards. The kind of thought decision I'm speaking of isn't a slogan hastily written in a notebook then forgotten. It is a silent but powerful declaration inside you that says, I don't need the world's permission to think differently. And from that moment, everything begins to shift. You look at a problem not with suspicion, but with a spirit that seeks solutions. You don't ask, can I do this? You ask, what do I need to build first? You don't seek agreement. You create reasons for others to recognize your value. That is the kind of difference no book can teach. But you will clearly feel it when you meet someone who has lived it. Great achievement does not come from being chosen by someone else. It comes from choosing to redefine how you think about yourself, because no one can limit you more powerfully than you can. If you agree to hold a small thought, you will act in small ways. And if you wait for consensus before you take action, you'll live your whole life according to someone else's pace. Meanwhile, those who make a difference always think faster than society, act sooner than their peers, and believe more deeply than any evidence can yet confirm. They live by a standard of thought they set themselves. And that is why they create the extraordinary. Do not confuse independent thinking with stubbornness. Strong thinkers do not oppose for the sake of proving a point. They simply don't need the crowd in order to believe. They understand that if an idea is right, it will face resistance at first, but resistance is not a sign that you are wrong. Sometimes it's the very proof that you are ahead of your time. And if your thinking isn't strong enough, you'll turn back because of a few frowns from people who never had the courage to live honestly themselves. Every great achievement you've ever witnessed has one thing in common. It once began as a doubted thought. Someone was once laughed at for starting over at age 40. Someone was warned that they were too different to succeed. Someone was pushed aside for thinking too far or too soon. But when they held on to that original decision of thought, the world had to turn and look at them differently. Not because they tried to prove something, but because they were consistent, and that consistency began with a mindset that did not wait for consensus. You don't need to know the entire path to begin. You just need clarity at the starting point. I will no longer think the way I used to. And when you hold that mindset long enough, it becomes a new thought system, not just for you, but for your surroundings as well, because right thinking spreads fast. One person who dares to live with their own awareness, who dares to act without asking permission, will unconsciously give others the permission to do the same. That's how you not only change yourself, but also open a path for those silently watching you from afar. You don't need to win first in order to think big. You think big and then you win. And you cannot think big if you're still trying to please every gaze. You must choose. Live for approval or live true to your real vision. Because no extraordinary mindset was ever born out of fear of being judged. They are born in the silence of someone who dares to believe in what no one else can yet see. And when you accept to live with that kind of thought, you've stepped into a territory that very few have the courage to enter. So don't wait for recognition. Don't wait for enough credentials. Don't wait for the market to be ready. Don't wait for others to encourage your change. Give yourself the right to begin with one decision of thought. No showmanship, no fanfare, just strong enough not to turn back. And day by day, you'll begin to see from one choice in your mind, you are redefining your entire life, not because of consensus, but because of your unwavering belief in the kind of thought you chose to protect. Like a silent oath to your future, you don't build your life with actions. You build it with thoughts. Because every action is merely the final outcome of a chain of thoughts repeated so many times in your mind that they become default commands. Each thought is like a brick. One repetition doesn't form a structure, but hundreds, thousands of repetitions, and you've erected an invisible construction you now live inside. The question isn't whether you're building something. The question is, are you building a fortress or constructing a prison for your own mind? The scariest part isn't that you think negatively once, it's that you let that thought become a habit, and then the habit becomes an identity. When you say, I'm not good at communication, it may begin as a simple reaction. But if you repeat it every time you face someone new, you're laying the first brick. You reinforce it each time you avoid a social encounter. You strengthen the walls by misinterpreting social cues. And one day you genuinely believe, I simply can't, not because anyone stopped you, but because you locked the mental door yourself with bricks made of thoughts you once assumed were harmless words. The mind does not forget. It stores every phrase you repeat. And the dangerous part is, it doesn't distinguish between truth and self-narrative. It simply follows what you consistently affirm. The more you reinforce a mental pattern, the more your nervous system automatically aligns with it. If you constantly say, I'm tired, your body will begin producing the physiological state of fatigue. Even if you're well-rested and well-fed, if you keep saying, I don't have time, you'll always feel rushed and lacking, even when your calendar is empty. That's how mental walls are built, brick by brick, silently, without blueprints, but with very real consequences. Conversely, those with inner strength aren't superior because they never doubted themselves. They simply chose to repeat thoughts that made them resilient. They also feel anxiety, but they don't let it define them. They choose to repeat intentional affirmations. I'm learning. I will adjust. I take responsibility. Each repetition lays a brick in the construction of a fortress. And a fortress is not to fight the world. A fortress is a place within you so strong that the world cannot shake you. You are living inside the structure of thought you've built. Look at your daily reactions. When facing challenges, what do you think first? When rejected, how do you respond? When an opportunity arises, do you instinctively doubt or step forward? That's not personality. That's the result of the bricks of thought you've been stacking for years. And you can rebuild that structure at any time. If you dare to tear down the old mental walls and choose new bricks, one by one. This doesn't require an audience. You don't need to shout. Just observe with clarity. The next time an old thought surfaces, like, I'm not capable, I don't deserve this, or I always fail, pause, ask, what kind of structure am I adding a brick to right now? And if you realize you're building a mental prison in that very moment, you have the power to stop. No more additions, no more repetition, no more cooperation. Even silence is a stronger choice than continuing to echo a weak thought. From there, choose your thoughts, like selecting materials to build a fortress. Ask, does this thought make me stronger? If not, discard it. Does this thought expand my perspective? If not, replace it. Does this thought help me act with power? If not, don't keep it, no matter how familiar it feels. You owe no blind loyalty to your past with outdated thinking patterns. You owe your future a solid structure built from new awareness. No one is here to check on you. But life doesn't lie. It will reflect exactly the kind of structure you're living in. If you find yourself constantly doubting, anxious, and procrastinating, it's not because you lack motivation, but because you are imprisoned inside a mental cage you built with your own thoughts. If you find yourself decisive, active, and composed, it's because you are living in a fortress you constructed from small but consistent thought choices. That is a truth no mask can hide. You can begin today. No need for a grand blueprint. Just one question repeated each morning. What thought am I repeating, and what is it building inside me? Then you'll see. No thought is harmless. Each one is either opening a new path or locking a door you've never walked through. And if you're mindful enough to choose again, brick by brick, you won't just rebuild your thinking. You'll rebuild who you are, and life will have no choice but to adjust itself to the new structure you are crafting with your hands, your mind, and your irreplaceable clarity. You don't live in reality. You live in a version of reality that your thinking allows you to see. The world doesn't appear as it truly is. It appears as you've been programmed to perceive it. Two people stand before the same situation. One sees opportunity, the other sees risk. One sees a challenge, the other sees a reason to quit. It's not that the world is different for them, it's that the lens of thought they're using is entirely opposite. That lens wasn't something you put on the day you became an adult. It formed much earlier, from things others said to you, from early experiences, from moments of rejection you never understood. And instead of revisiting those events, you accepted them as truth. This is just the way things are. You began labeling the world through a framework that seemed harmless. Successful people are just lucky. I wasn't born with the right conditions. Everything is always difficult for me. These conclusions became filters. From that day forward, you only saw what confirmed your existing beliefs and dismissed anything that contradicted them. This is called cognitive bias. But to put it simply, it's the way you constantly edit the world so it matches the thinking you don't dare question. And the more you reinforce that lens, the more you live in a confined space where everything you call reality is simply the result of a past thought pattern. It's not life that limits you. It's your thinking that limits how you see life. There are people who live in difficulty and still see solutions. There are others surrounded by privilege who only find excuses to delay. What's the difference? It lies in how they assign meaning to their circumstances. One person believes every problem is an opportunity to grow. They approach challenges like a training ground. Another believes that trouble is a sign to stop. They step back at the slightest resistance. Your thoughts are not just reactions to reality. They are the navigation map you use to interpret every experience you encounter. The world has no inherent meaning. You are the one who assigns it. A glance, a tone of voice, an ambiguous sentence, all are just raw data. But your reaction is shaped by the thinking you believe to be true, and from there you design your emotions. Your emotions design your behavior shapes your results circle back and reinforce your worldview. A closed loop. This is why negative people will always find proof to stay negative, while positive people are not simply cheerful, they are alert enough to choose a more empowering perspective. No one is absolutely objective. The only thing you can do is recognize this. Your thinking is always adjustable. And when you adjust your lens, your entire ecosystem changes. What you once called failure might become your foundation. What you once feared might become the test that elevates you. What once seemed like a wall might turn out to be a door you hadn't opened properly. But you won't see any of this if you continue living behind a foggy lens of your own making. What did you once believe was unchangeable? Think again. Even the truth you hold now might be an inherited belief. It could be from your parents. It could be the result of an unhealed wound. It could be from a society that once told you not to dream too big. But truth is not fixed. It's a silent agreement between you and how you interpret the world. And that agreement can be rewritten if you're brave enough to ask yourself, what lens am I looking through? And is it serving me? Right thinking does not deny reality. It redefines reality in a way that makes you more proactive. When you choose to see challenges as lessons, you're not being weak, you're being wise. When you choose to find the good within chaos, you're not naive, you're holding on to your power of perception. And when you decide not to let the old lens keep clouding your future, you're not fighting reality, you're redesigning the map to find a better route. Everyone lives in the same physical world, but in entirely different perceptual worlds. That's why some people rise from rock bottom, while others stagnate in ideal conditions. Reality doesn't determine achievement. The lens of thought is what defines destiny. The more you believe that your perspective can be changed, the more you gain access to a new reality. One filled with opportunities, choices, and possibilities you never imagined. So the next time you say, this is just how things are, it can't change, pause. Check your lens. Ask, what meaning am I assigning to this? Can I look at it from a different angle? Am I unconsciously reinforcing an outdated belief? Those questions are the key to beginning a new life, even if nothing around you has changed yet. Because you don't live in the world as it is, you live in the world as you think it is. And if you want to change your outcomes, don't just act differently, start by seeing differently. Because the lens isn't just a tool for vision, it's a tool for shaping your destiny. And if you dare to change that, you won't just shift your perspective, you'll transform your entire life. You cannot expect a peaceful life if you allow any thought to settle freely in your mind. The mind is not a pit stop for every passing wave of negativity. It is not a boarding house for drifters. Those transient, lost, purposeless thoughts that show up only to sow doubt and disrupt the resilience you're trying to build. Yet, ironically, most people never set standards for what's allowed to enter their thinking. They control who enters their home, who drives their car, who steps into their office, but they leave the gates of their mind wide open, letting toxic thoughts occupy the most precious mental real estate they own, day after day. Every thought, no matter how small, carries energy. Some are light and lift you up, some are heavy and pull you down. Some thoughts pass through harmlessly, but others arrive like uninvited guests, and you, in a moment of poor vigilance, invite them to stay indefinitely. You call it a habit of negative thinking. But no, it's not just a habit, it's a silent decision repeated again and again to allow thoughts with no value to take over the most sacred space in your life. A person whose mind is filled with negativity doesn't necessarily have a miserable life. They may be successful, capable, admired, but inside they are tense, anxious, and exhausted because each day they are harboring the wrong kinds of questions. What terrible thing might happen next? Am I really enough? What if I fail? These questions are not meant to be solved. They just want to exist. And the more they are repeated, the more they become your personality. But stay alert. That's not your essence. It's the result of mental standards that were left unguarded. You don't have to fight every negative thought, but you must learn how to stand at the gate. When a thought shows up, ask, is this thought coming from fear or from vision? Does it make me stronger or weaker? Does it lead me to constructive action or just cause me to retreat? If the answer leans toward negativity, you don't need to react. You just don't give it permission. Like a landlord declining to rent a room, no argument, no anger. Just calmly close the door. Your mind is sacred ground. It is where ideas are planted, where decisions are conceived, where your spirit is forged. So why allow it to be occupied by unnamed, aimless visitors who come only to complain and plant doubt? Take a closer look. Your deepest exhaustion doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from thinking too many things that don't matter. You're tired from hosting imaginary conversations that never happened. You're worried from playing out scenarios that will never become real. You're drained because you let negative voices speak for too long without interruption. A person with strong inner power isn't free from negative thoughts. They simply don't let them stay. Negative thoughts may knock. That's unavoidable. But whether you open the door, roll out a red carpet, pour them tea and let them move in, that's your choice. And that choice repeated daily determines whether you are the master or merely a tenant in your own mind. Build a gate for your mind, a place where all thoughts must pause for inspection. It doesn't have to be harsh, but it must have standards. If a thought makes you shrink, procrastinate, blame, or doubt yourself, put it on the examination table. Don't deny your feelings, but don't surrender your authority either. You can feel something, but not let it command you. You can worry, but still act. You can hear the whispers of negativity, but still choose to repeat the clear voice of your purpose. A mental warrior doesn't win by avoiding negativity. They win through cognitive discipline, only retaining what supports their forward motion. They don't waste mental space on anything that doesn't serve their mission. And you too. You have the right to select, the right to remove, the right to reset your thought selection system. No one else can do that for you. And if you don't, eventually you'll be overwhelmed by noise and wonder why you feel lost. Don't mistake vigilance for negativity. You can prepare for risks without living in fear. You can assess your weaknesses without devaluing yourself. Positive thinking is not about painting everything in pretty colors. It's about choosing to keep thoughts that lift you up, orient you towards solutions, and bring you back to your stronger self. And if you've been the kind of person who's hosted negative guests for too long, it's okay. Each day is a new chance to change the sign on the door. You are no longer an inn. You are a fortress. And from today forward, anything that wants to enter your mind must prove it is worthy of the life you are building. There will be no magical moment when you wake up and suddenly think like a master. There will be no glorious evening when you successfully install right thinking, and from that point on, all your reactions, decisions, and beliefs run smoothly like a flawless program. There is no final update for the mind. Right thinking is not a breakthrough moment. It is an operating system that must be rewritten every single day. And if you don't actively update it, the old default will return. It always does. Most people have experienced moments of clarity, a lesson that strikes the mind, a quote that awakens them, a failure that forces them to reflect. In that moment, you see clearly you need to change how you think. But the problem isn't whether you realize it or not. The problem is that you don't sustain it. You let right thinking become a one-time epiphany instead of a series of intentional behaviors. And like software that isn't maintained, outdated thought patterns begin to run in the background, operating you without notification. Right thinking is a skill, and like any skill, it requires continuous practice. No one keeps their muscles forever if they stop training. Likewise, you won't maintain sharp thinking if you stop self-checking, self-adjusting, and rewriting your inner code. Today you may be clear-minded, but if tomorrow you drift into complacency, get lazy with awareness, you'll slip back into old comfort zones. And worse yet, you'll believe you're still on the right track, when in reality you're drifting backward to where you started. That's why you need a system, not just inspiration. You need a process where each day becomes a mental line of code, a moment to review belief structures, remove outdated logic, and install thoughts that lead to more effective action. This doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as asking, is this thought coming from vision or fear? Or, is this choice moving me toward my goal or just making me comfortable? Those questions, repeated long enough, become background commands in a stronger operating system. You don't need to overhaul your entire thinking in one day. You only need to not neglect it for even one day. Your nervous system will reflect precisely what you repeat. If you repeat mindfulness, you'll develop faster cognitive reflexes. If you repeat blind reactions, you'll erode your internal control system. Every thought you allow is a line of code, and every line either strengthens or breaks the very system you're trying to build. Stop expecting that with enough motivation, everything will fall into place. Motivation is a fast-burning fuel, but it's unstable. Meanwhile, right thinking is built on discipline, the kind that doesn't need favorable emotions to function. Truly strong people aren't the ones who think clearly when they're feeling great. They're the ones who continue thinking clearly when everything is chaotic. And you can only gain that capacity by training it every day, not waiting for inspiration, not depending on perfect circumstances. You can set up small rituals to rewrite your mental operating system each morning. A deliberate question, a self-defining affirmation, a chosen action carried out despite emotion. These are how you tell your mind, I'm in charge, not default programming. And over time, you'll clearly notice old thoughts no longer rule. They may return, but they no longer command, because you've installed a protective layer, active awareness, updated regularly like a security system, guarding the smooth operation of your internal software. Right thinking is a daily choice, not a one-time inspiration. It is the habit of re-questioning, resetting, rewriting. You cannot keep running an outdated version of yourself and expect new results. You must be brave enough to admit some old logic was once right, but has now expired. Some old reactions once saved you, but now hold you back. And the hardest thing of all is to let go of thoughts that once helped you survive. But if your only goal is to survive, you will never rise to truly live right. See your thinking as software, not as a monument. Software always has new versions, always contains bugs to fix, and always needs updating to run smoothly on a life system that changes daily. You are the coder, you are the tester, you are the operator. Don't hand that job to anyone else. And don't neglect it, even for a day, because if you don't rewrite, the old default will return, and that default, that's the limit you once fought to overcome. Don't let it become your chains again, just because you forgot that. Right. Thinking is the work of every day, every choice, every single thought you allow to exist in your mind. This world cannot manipulate someone who has gained control over their own thinking, not because they're immune to external influences, but because they do not hand over the power to dictate their reactions to anything outside the boundaries of their own awareness. The market may fluctuate, people may change their minds, circumstances may turn against them, but those who master their thinking never lose their direction. They may adjust, but they are not swayed. They may change, but they are not carried away. Most people don't live proactively, they live in reaction. One negative piece of news is enough to break their focus. One comment they didn't like can make them question their self-worth. A single dismissive glance from someone else can shake their confidence for the entire day. This is not because they are weak, but because they have never truly established a mental control system within themselves. They let their minds operate like a radio turned up loud in a busy street. Anyone can say what they want, think what they want, trigger whatever emotion they want without asking for permission. The person who controls their thinking is not someone who doesn't feel, They are someone who feels but doesn't lose themselves in the emotion. They don't deny reality, but they don't allow any piece of external data to reprogram how they perceive themselves. They can hear criticism, and instead of letting it become their truth, they place it under the microscope of thought. This is their opinion, not a definition of who I am. They read bad news, but they don't let it invade their inner state. They encounter difficulty, but they are the ones who decide what meaning it will be given. That's why they're not easily manipulated. Not because they're rigid, but because they have an internal operating system stronger than the pull of external conditions. When others panic, they search for clarity. When the market shifts, they don't lose their way, because their goals were never anchored to surface-level variables. They understand that chaos is temporary, but the ability to control one's thinking is the most enduring foundation. In a society saturated with stimuli, from information, media, to subtle comparison, those who lack mental control are emotionally directed by forces that don't even belong to them. Another person's success makes them feel like failures. A stranger's coldness makes them feel unworthy. A new trend causes them to rush to alter their identity so they won't be left behind. And those being manipulated never realize they're being manipulated because they believe every thought they have is natural. But no thought is truly natural if you haven't examined it. Every thought is the result of what you've allowed into your mind. The one who controls their thinking knows how to ask the right questions at the right moment. Am I thinking this because I choose to or because I've been led here? Is this belief based on truth or just a temporary feeling? Am I acting based on my goal or reacting based on the market? Each question is a filter, and that filter becomes the shield protecting you from the invisible but persistent manipulation of the external world. True independence isn't found in finances or status. It lies in your ability to think without borrowing someone else's mental framework. You can live among the crowd without blending into it. You can seek advice without being unconsciously redirected. You can observe trends without becoming a product of them. That is a rare kind of freedom, the kind that requires no walls, because your mind itself is the fortress. And the interesting part is the one who controls their thinking doesn't need to posture to prove it. They aren't easily provoked because they don't live to react. They aren't easily manipulated because they don't seek external validation. They walk with the calm certainty of someone who knows the only thing they must firmly maintain is the quality of thought they sustain each day. Everything else, the market, people, circumstances, can change. But if they control their thinking, they remain the one in command. So if you want to become untouchable in a world full of noise and instability, you don't need to start with coldness or isolation. You only need to start with one commitment. From today, I will not allow anything external to define me without my permission. And then you'll realize the things that once frightened you, once held you back, once manipulated you into silence, they all become meaningless once you've reclaimed control over your own thinking. That's where true power begins, quietly but unshakably. Like a foundation no one can tear down. You may have strong willpower, clear goals, and a burning desire to break through. But if you live in the wrong environment, all of that will be worn down day by day. Right thinking cannot take root in toxic soil. It needs space to breathe, the right conditions to grow, and continuous nourishment from elements you cannot afford to neglect. People, information, sounds, even the seemingly meaningless conversations you allow yourself to engage in every day. Never underestimate the power of environment. A healthy tree planted in salty soil will still die, and a clear mind placed in the wrong space will gradually fade in ways you don't even notice. Every day, you absorb something without realizing it. A doubtful remark from a family member, a complaint-filled conversation from a coworker, a social media post filled with comparison and mockery. Your mind records it all. It doesn't need your consent. It doesn't need you to remember clearly. Exposure alone is enough, and over time, those things leave a mark. Then when you try to act on a new belief, something holds you back. You think you lack motivation, but the truth is, you're being pulled backward by layers of distorted energy you've allowed to surround you for far too long. Right thinking cannot survive in the wrong environment because environment tends to overpower the individual. Unless the individual is exceptionally self-aware, you might make the right decision in the morning, but if you spend the rest of the day around people who constantly doubt, constantly feed you limitations, by evening you'll start to question, am I being delusional? Not because you don't trust yourself, but because you've let the outer environment manipulate the inner framework of your thinking. Thought isn't just created from within, it's constantly being edited by what you surround yourself with. Some people aren't bad, but they're still the wrong environment. They don't believe in change, they don't accept challenges, they're never disciplined with themselves, and then they invalidate your efforts with phrases that seem harmless. Just live a normal life. Don't aim too high. Take it easy. No need to push yourself. That's life. Everyone's the same. If you hear those once, you can laugh. But if you hear them every day, they start to erode you. And then you're not just battling your own old thinking, you're up against an entire belief system embedded in your surroundings. People often believe that being strong alone is enough. But the truth is, you can't fight the pull of your environment with personal willpower alone, unless you regularly step back to recover. Like a clean magnet placed among rusty nails, no matter how polished it is, it will still pick up residue unless cleaned daily. You need clear spaces, uplifting conversations, moments of stillness to hear your own voice again, the voice untouched by others' anxiety, doubt, or bias. Right thinking doesn't require you to isolate, but it demands that you curate. You can't keep spending hours each week in negative conversations and then wonder why you can't sustain high energy. You can't keep consuming content that stirs confusion and then complain about your anxiety. You can't stay close to people who normalize procrastination and expect yourself to stay disciplined. Everything you allow into your mind leaves a trace. Think back to the moments when your thinking was clearest. It may have been after a trip, a quiet morning, or a moment you finally let go of a relationship that no longer served you. In those times, it wasn't just time you gained space to breathe, and in that space, clarity returned. That's the signal. Right thinking needs the right space to survive. That space may be physical, but more deeply, it's energetic space, choice space, awareness space that you consciously design around yourself. If you're serious about your personal growth, you must be willing to evaluate your current environment with unwavering honesty. Ask yourself, who leaves me with less belief in myself after each conversation? What kind of content am I consuming? And does it lead me to act or to delay? Does the space I live in support clarity or distract me from it? These questions are not easy, but if you don't face them, you'll keep living under the illusion that the problem is you, when in fact, the real culprit is the environment you haven't yet had the courage to change. Right thinking cannot be a temporary state if the environment remains a constant gravitational pull. And you cannot maintain inner clarity without protecting yourself from the mental noise outside. Sometimes growth doesn't come from learning something new, but from clearing away what no longer deserves to exist around you. Not everyone is meant to walk with you into the future, and that's okay. The mistake is in keeping everything and losing yourself in the clutter. So if you truly want right thinking to become a sustainable foundation, start from where you stand. Look around, filter, cut, rearrange your living space, your mental space, your energy space. Then you'll see you don't need another secret technique, just the right environment. And the clarity within you will naturally rise, solid and steady like a tree planted in the right soil, the right climate, no longer being pulled back by roots clinging to barren ground. If you're looking for something that will make you successful overnight, right thinking is not the answer. It won't make you rich by tomorrow morning. It won't make pain vanish instantly. It doesn't bring applause or create sudden victory, but if you stay committed to it, if you quietly hold on to it through the ordinary and unremarkable days, it will become the most resilient mental insurance for a life that doesn't drift off track, doesn't panic, and doesn't lose its core identity in the whirlwind of rapid external change. What causes most people to be disappointed is not right thinking, but misplaced expectations. They assume that if they change their mindset, everything will immediately improve. They expect rewards right after starting, and when results don't arrive as fast as they hoped, they begin to doubt the process instead of remaining faithful to the path. They forget that all meaningful growth takes time to take root, just like planting a seed.